The Egyptians did not have that technology. Right on the heels of World War II, we had this rash of flying saucers being seen and UFOs. That would be like going into King Tut's tomb for the very first time, and as you're breaking down the rock wall and peering into the vault, all of a sudden seeing a fully assembled 747 jet sitting in the tomb. Foo Fighters, we talked a little bit about Senator Ted Stevens and Allied pilots seeing these Foo Fighters during World War II. Let me ask you a question, Shawn. Right on the heels of World War II, we had this rash of flying saucers being seen and UFOs that were, in some cases, radar returns in the early 50s doing 10 to 13,000 miles an hour, okay? Where were we? Well, we had just come out of World War II. We became the world's premier superpower. We had barely broken the sound barrier, and we hadn't been into space, and we were transitioning from propeller to the jet age. These things, we forget about 13,000 miles an hour, we could barely break Mach 1, right? Who had that capability at the time if we didn't? Well, where was Russia? They were just entering the atomic age themselves. China, they're in the middle of a famine, right? So there's no one who had that capability. And I always use this analogy. That would be like going back into the 40s. That would be like going into King Tut's tomb for the very first time. And as you're breaking down the rock wall and peering into the vault, all of a sudden seeing a fully assembled 747 jet sitting in the tomb. Mm-hmm. Temporally, it doesn't make sense. The Egyptians did not have that technology. So what is that aircraft doing in that tomb? It doesn't make sense. So, you know, there's the adage, in the face, there's two types of people in the world. In the face of new information, you can change your opinion based upon new facts, or, like some people, reject the facts and stick with your own narrative because it's more comfortable and convenient. I think it's probably smarter and wiser in the face of new facts, we need to recalculate our thinking. And that's why I think, back to this question here, it's important that the people know that the U.S. government has been spending your taxpayer dollars, a lot of it, trying to research these things that are very real. You don't spend millions and millions of dollars and billions of dollars on a wild goose chase. Mm-hmm. You don't do it. Mm-hmm. And hiding black budgets and things. You do it because something's real and legit. And I think that's where we are. Certainly my experience in the Pentagon and the intelligence community, this is substantiated.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people think maybe the Germans had some higher technology.
Well, they did. Well, they certainly did. We know that, right? They had the German Wunderwaffe program, Wonder Weapon program, had the Messerschmitt, right? The ME, what was it, 108 ME? That the first jet airplane, really, that it was the Germans that came up with it. The V1 rocket, the V2 rocket, right? The buzz bombs and the long range rockets. Those were all German technologies. In fact, what Operation Paperclip, when World War II ended, what did? We stole it all and brought it here, right? And Werner von Braun and the Saturn V rocket, you know, that was just, I hate to say it, but that was a glorified V2 rocket, you know? So, yes, the Germans did. And then they had these other very interesting programs, you know, not too dissimilar to what the Pentagon had. They had, the Nazis had something called the Anna-Nerva, which really looked at some kind of far out stuff. Now, some people will look and say, oh, it was nothing but cult and witchcraft. Okay, but there was enough enough data to suggest that whatever they were doing worked or could help them with the war effort. So they invested a lot of time and money into that. And that's not just, you know, I was mentioning this because you said Germans, but other countries did the same thing. There's other countries that were always looking for that strategic advantage. What would it take for me to have a decisive advantage on the battlefield, in the battle space? So people say, well, why would they spend it? Look, our country did. But one of my colleagues, Hal Puthoff, the godfather of the U.S. government, the CIA's psychic espionage program. That's right, I just said psychic espionage program. Your tax dollars paid for programs like Stargate and Grill Flame before that and various other names before that. Why? Because there was some information to suggest that it worked. And oh, by the way, the Russians were doing the same thing. You know, so people look at things and say, well, that's silly, that would never work. And it turns out that sometimes it does work. Look at the Navy SOSUS, your Navy guy, the Navy SOSUS program back in the 50s. Who would have ever thought, well, I could just drop some microphones in the ocean and maybe I can listen to Russian submarines? It worked, right? So, is it really that? Is it pseudoscience? Well, it's pseudoscience until it works. Now it's just science.
I mean, I also think that maybe as Americans, we're a little arrogant, thinking that that nobody else could have this kind of technology because we're so we're so advanced, and maybe somebody else has it. And they're just not revealing it because they don't want to play the fucking world police.
Right.
We get ourselves involved in everything, and
Well,
we're involved in everything.
why would you want to tell somebody, look, like we're in this wonderful room here, but if you're like me and sometimes paranoid, I've always have contingencies, and I have contingencies for contingencies. So if you were a country that had some super secret technology, would you want to advertise to the world that you have it? Well, it's
Kind of what I'm getting at.
Right. So it is possible.
We think we're the smartest,
Right.
but
This is
maybe
why I
we
say
aren't.
temporally, I think now you're right, because we know that near peer adversaries are absolutely ahead of us in certain areas. I won't say what they are, but we know that, and it's a problem for us. But if you go back to the end of World War II, we're really
Who are some? Who are some that are?
I can't say that. I don't want.
say who?
I don't want to. I want to let our folks in government do their job, and they don't need me spewing out vulnerabilities that we might have where other countries are ahead of us. But quantum computing, for example, certain type of capabilities maybe in space. We have to maintain that competitive advantage. But again, let's go back to what we originally said here. If you look at this from a temporal perspective, time perspective, at the end of World War II, we really were the only world superpower at the time. We had dropped the atomic bomb and decisively ended World War II. What was referred to as the greatest generation then began to invest in the United States and became the world superpower, a dominant power. There was no real near peer other than the Russians at the time, and they were still nowhere near what we were able to do. So I can buy now if you say that there is a foreign adversary that has this capability. Okay, I doubt, but maybe, but not 70 years ago. And let's look at this, because Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, when he was senator, said something very interesting. He said, I almost hope that these things are not human, because if they're human, that's almost more scary. Who's created this technology? And I think he's absolutely correct. To put this into perspective, we spend billions with a B, billions of dollars each year to maintain a strategic advantage from an intelligence perspective, all 17 agencies of the intelligence community, to know more than our enemies, right? Now imagine if there was a country that had the ability to develop a technology and deploy this technology that could come into our country completely unimpeded, unchallenged, unseen, be able to do whatever wanted to do, collect ISR on our military equities, and interfere with our nuclear strategic capabilities, turn them off, right? And then go back home, no sweat, and nobody would ever know. That would be, and by the way, have been in development for the last 70 years on this technology. That would be the greatest intelligence failure this country has ever experienced, eclipsing that of even 9/11. Because despite the billions of dollars that we invest, there wasn't a single indication or shred of information over 70 years that some country had managed to develop this technology. Think of the resources and infrastructure required to develop and deploy a technology like that. Right? And you didn't get one shred of evidence in 70 years that country X was doing that, right? So choose your poison. It's either someone else's or it's foreign adversarial. If it's foreign adversarial, you need to fire every single person right now in national security and start from scratch.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.